Now broadcasting the Dr. Nilda Business Foresight Show, positioning your business with strategies for an extraordinary future. Dr. Nilda features expert guests from diverse backgrounds to bring you their stories and strategies that have helped them reach their success. The diversity in industries gives you that panoramic view from an array of industries. They are innovators, thought leaders, trendsetters, and strategists. Here, Dr. Nilda reveals strategies that will position you to be on the cutting edge and be able to do what you love with the people you like, making the profits you want to live the lifestyle that you have dreamed of. And now, here's your host, Dr. Nilda Perez.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dr. Nilda Business Foresight Show. And with me today, I have my co-host, Rachel Calderon, and a very special guest, Dr. Josh Luke. Say hello, everyone.
Hello. How you doing?
Good. So I want to read your bio. It's a very interesting bio, and I'm quite fascinated by it. Dr. Josh Luke is a healthcare futurist and a former hospital CEO. His expertise includes sharing simple tactics and how to make healthcare more affordable, as well as how to access the best doctors and the best hospitals. Dr. Luke started his career as a jet-setting sports marketer, working with some of the most famous athletes in the world. Thereafter, his career changed to healthcare, and it was brought on by his grandmother's disease process. He ascended to become a hospital CEO by age 32, and after he penned his first book, he became a best-selling author. He now finds solace in sharing his expertise as caretaker for his mom, and being without health insurance for his family for a short time has given him a deeply emotional understanding of the other side of care delivery. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Luke.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on the show.
So is it Dr. Luke or Dr. Josh?
Well, I used to tell my students at the University of Southern California, where I teach public policy, I used to tell them just to call me Josh. But then when Forbes recruited me to write this book, Health Wealth is Healthcare Bankrupting Your Business, they said, hey, from now on, you're Dr. Josh Luke all the time. Don't be so nice because, you are a doctor. You're an authority figure. On LinkedIn, you can find me at drjoshluke.com and also on the other social media platforms. So I guess from now on, it's Dr. Josh Luke.
Okay, awesome. Very awesome. Okay, so here's my first question. You're a healthcare futurist.
Mm-hmm.
Explain to me what a healthcare futurist is.
It's such a great question. So I've been a public speaker. I was a hospital CEO for about 10 years. And after the Affordable Care Act passed, I started getting a lot more requests to speak. And I think people found my presentation style interesting because I started as a nursing home administrator before I became a hospital CEO. And that's really rare in healthcare, to find somebody from outside of the acute hospital space that knew a whole lot about what's going on beyond the hospital, because the hospital's been the center of the universe. So as I was traveling the country and speaking, and as my first book came out, I a few times heard people introduce me as a healthcare futurist, and that wasn't on my bio. It wasn't anything I asked to do. It was people that had heard me speak before and said, he's always telling us what's going to happen, and he's been right. He's had a really good track record. And so about the third time somebody introduced me as a healthcare futurist, I got on the plane that day and went home and said, I better figure out what that means. I better give it a definition, and it's kind of got a nice ring to it. And so I added it to my LinkedIn, and I just came up with, hey, when somebody asked me what a healthcare futurist is, and for your listeners who are on LinkedIn, I actually have a story with that title. Okay. What is a healthcare futurist? They can go to drjoshluke.com, click on articles, and scroll down to find it. But what I said is, look, my job as a public policy instructor at USC and as a former CEO is not just to interpret policy for you, but to share with you how it's going to impact you, whether you are a mom, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a nursing home, or just an individual in corporate America who wants to know how to prepare for the changes in healthcare. Right. And not necessarily specific to politics either, because what's going on in America right now, it doesn't matter if it's Obama, Trump, Hillary, or whoever comes next. They're not debating making healthcare affordable for us or reducing prices. They're only debating who's going to pay for it. And we're trying to change that narrative.
Oh, I love it. I love that. Wow. So let's go back. You switched from sports marketing into the career of healthcare. How'd you make that shift? And tell me a little bit about that story.
Well, I have two older brothers who are professional athletes, right? And for a high school kid and for a college kid, that's quite a bit of pressure. And of course, I had the same goals, grew up in a sports house, but somewhere around my senior year in high school, I'd realized that while God had blessed me in many ways, that being a professional athlete wasn't going to be one of them. So I set my sights on working in sports, professional sports, hopefully. Went to college, got a master's degree. And within about a year of getting out of college, I had already worked for, in some way, shape, or form, for all four major sports professional groups in America. I'd worked at PGA Tour events. I was really living the dream. I was able to work for, do some marketing for some really famous baseball players and things like that. And it's actually on the way home on a private jet, the only time I've ever been on a private jet in my life, back from a media tour in New York with a really famous baseball player at the time, where I looked at my wife, and we'd only been married a week or so at that time. And I said, wow, this is amazing. I'm 26 years old and I'm living my career dream. But just that 1 week of marriage helped me understand that my perspectives were changing, my views were changing. And I really it had dawned upon me that I wanted to get into an industry where I could make more of a difference, have more of a purpose, and maybe a social mission. And I wasn't sure what that was. I just asked my young wife to support me in that process, and she did. And within a few months, my grandmother was going through the aging process, and it was really frustrating me. And I heard one of my students at the university I was teaching at came up to me and said, hey, I've heard you talk about wanting a career change. I've heard you talk about your grandmother and the frustration with her inability to access basic health care and the lack of communication between her caretakers. And we have an opening at my healthcare facility, and I think you'd be perfect for it. And that really got the ball rolling. And I made a switch to healthcare a few weeks later. And within a few years, 5 years, I think I became a hospital CEO at age 32. It was a real blessing.
So you're saying that you became super passionate about the healthcare industry and you switched over because it really hit home for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was personal.
So could you tell me a little bit about the story? Can you share the story?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So my grandmother basically, I moved away with my wife after we got married. We're from Southern California, and we moved up to Nevada, Northern Nevada, the Reno area. I was getting my PhD at the time. And my grandmother, who I'd been close to my whole life, who lived in the neighborhood, grandpa had passed away, and she was going from an assisted living to a nursing home to the hospital to some other facility that I'd never heard of called an LTAC, and then back home with home care. And it's amazing that when I called the caretakers, they would make comments like, well, she's only been here 2 days. We don't even have her chart yet. Or I don't know where she's at. She went to the hospital 4 days ago, but they said she's not there anymore. And it blew me away that the person responsible for my grandmother's care was making comments like this. And this is, of course, back when I was just a sports marketer. And so as I found myself in healthcare just a few years later, what I learned is this is normal, and it's unfortunate, and it's scary. And the motivations of the healthcare delivery model, physicians and hospitals, are to put a head in a bed. That's how they get paid. It's called fee for service. And so I asked a lot of questions as a 32-year-old CEO, and I never stopped asking those questions. And a lot of people would say I'm now an industry truth teller. After 10 years as a CEO, I exposed the underbelly of the hospital and healthcare system. But I'll tell you what happened in January of 2018, about 2 weeks after my book, Health Wealth. And here's a copy of what my book looks like if you haven't seen it. It's called Health Wealth: Is Healthcare Bankrupting Your Business? 9 Steps to Financial Recovery.
Yep.
It hit number one.
I just got
Cool.
it.
Yeah, it hit number one on Amazon on launch day. But here's what happened within 2 weeks. Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, and JP Morgan Chase announced they are blowing up their insurance company, getting rid of it, and starting over and doing their own thing. Guess where that concept is introduced? Right here. And I'm not saying I came up with it. What I'm saying is, folks, if we're going to end this epidemic, this healthcare affordability epidemic in America, we have to start over. It's a system broken beyond repair. No coincidence. That's the name of one of the chapters in the book. A system broken beyond repair as a result of the villains of greed. Who are the villains of greed? Well, it's capitalism. It's people who want to make money. It's people like me who used to be a hospital CEO. It's big pharma. It's doctors. And, they didn't get into it to be villains of greed. That's just what the product that resulted as a result of the fee-for-service model. So that really explains my whole journey. It's become personal. Let me close that answer with this stat. Recent projections show that between 40 and 50% of a millennial's lifetime earnings in America will go to healthcare. That's tragic. There is no other way to describe it. That's tragic.
Horrible.
So this is personal for me. My kids are Gen Z. They're not even millennials. So I can only imagine that's going to jump over 50% unless we do something about it for the Gen Zs.
Okay. Wow. So let me ask you, what are like 3 tips that you can give our audience on saving thousands annually in healthcare?
Great question, Rachel. And what you're doing is you're teeing up my next book, which comes out in September, called Health Wealth: Is Healthcare Bankrupting Your Family? So that's the question. And guess what the first sentence of that book's going to say? Are you an EHC, an engaged healthcare consumer? When you buy a car, you shop the model, you shop the make, you shop the price.
Right.
When you buy a home, you shop the neighborhood, price, quality, number of bedrooms, right?
Absolutely.
So why don't you do that with healthcare? Well, I'll tell you why. It's 6 words that killed American healthcare. And those 6 words are this: don't worry, your insurance will pay for it. Well, your insurance might pay for it right then, but next year, when your company comes to you and says, hey, we raised your rates another $300. You did pay for it by choosing the more expensive hospital. And hospitals have always been able to get away with this, not being transparent. And until we become EHCs, they will continue to not be transparent. Did you know they don't even share their prices with you? They say things like, oh, don't worry, your insurance will pay for it, because that way they can keep raising prices and you'll never know. So let me answer your question. 3 steps that you as an individual can do to save yourself thousands, okay? So the first one is really you become an EHC by doing 3 things. You have a plan. It's the 3 Ps: a plan based on personalized medicine and based on preventative medicine. So let's be more specific than that. Medical tourism. That sounds like, oh, I read about that. You got to go to Costa Rica or India.
Yeah, well, futurist. We understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's not. Can you go to India or Costa Rica and save a bunch? Yeah. And the doctors are actually Americans and it's literally you're saving 80%, but it still sounds pretty crazy, right? Great quality. You can go there if you want, but that's not medical tourism today. Today is you drive an extra half hour and you can save 60%. Your employer might save 80%. You will save 60%. Little tip for your listeners on point number 1 of saving thousands. When you choose a center of excellence, a hospital or a surgery center or a physician who is a center of excellence in your company's network, when you choose that center of excellence over one of the bigger, shinier ones that isn't a center of excellence, go to your human resources director and say, hey, if I pick this center of excellence and drive the extra 30 minutes, will you pay my $1,000 copay? Do you know why they're going to say yes to that? Because it's going to save them $30,000. That's a net of $29,000 gain for them saying, yeah, we'll give you $1,000 to do it. So that's number 1. Medical tourism is local. It's county to county, and the average, and I'm going to give props to my colleague, David Contorno, who was on my podcast, the Health Wealth podcast. Okay. David said his data shows that the average distance you have to drive to find a center of excellence is only 35 miles. Well, gosh, we drive farther than that to get to work every day, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So 35 miles. So number 1 is become a medical tourist within your city, within your county. Understand it's only a half-hour drive. That's number 1. Number 2 is really telehealth and remote monitoring, which is this. You can do a doctor's appointment from your living room. And if you're a mom with children, think about this for a minute. School-age children, instead of having to run 2 to school, run 1 home, keep them away from the others in case they're contagious, get an appointment, wait all day to get the appointment, cancel all your plans. No. That's how it worked as a young Gen Xer when my mom was trying to get me to the doctor. Nowadays, your son wakes up ill, you go on your phone app and you say, hey, I need a telehealth consult as soon as possible. Within 20 minutes, you and your son are sitting on your couch, talking to a physician, asking you questions, using the technology to show me his throat, show me his nose, show me his ears, whatever it is, okay? And you have a prescription waiting for you at the pharmacy 20 minutes later.
Right.
I will tell you, being Gen Xers, and even some of the Xennials or Millennials, whichever you are, it took us a little time to get used to this concept, but the first time you do it, you will go, why would I ever go to the doctor again?
Exactly.
Without doing this from my couch for 20 minutes. So those are 2 tactics that really every American can do. And I will tell you, becoming an EHC, engaging in the process, medical tourism, those are a couple things you can do. Telehealth and remote monitoring. And here's number 3, and this is a fun one. DNA testing. Now, hold on. Don't go, wait, I read about 23 10 years ago. Well, that was 10 years ago, way ahead of the game. 23andMe would probably be the first to tell you that they created a huge PR issue for themselves and everybody. DNA testing is real. You take a cotton ball, you swab, you put it, you mail it in. They send you your results that say, here are the medications that work on Josh, and here are the ones that don't. Here are the dosages he should take. Here are the ones he should never take. It's called pharmacogenetics, okay? It's real and it's here and it's live. But the only way doctors will do this, because the technology between the hospital, the nursing home, your doctor, the pharmacy isn't there. They don't all communicate. They all have their own agenda still.
And which is really bizarre, especially in this informational age.
So own it. That's the whole point. You own it. You get the DNA test, you take a picture of it, you put it on your phone, and everywhere you go, say, no, don't prescribe me that, doc. Here's what works for me. Because now you're owning it, and they're going to go, hey, cool, good for you. Because nobody else does that. You can also do that with nutrition.
I'll be honest with you. Some of them will say, cool, good for you. But some doctors, they want full control. Yeah. They want full control. Yeah. And they get very annoyed, you know, and I can tell you this from my mom. I take my mom to the doctor. My mom never gets sick. And they want to give her this shot. They want to give her the flu shot. They want to give her this, that, the other. And she's like, I don't need that. I don't get that. I don't need it. And she knows her body. She really understands her body. Never really taken medication. And you know what? It is the biggest fight every time she goes to the doctor, because the doctor wants to put her on all kinds of medicine. Right. Gives her all kinds of injections. And, you know, the reality is, and they don't even really look at you. So they're not as embracing as, I mean.
You're a widget. That's right. You're a widget in the fee-for-service free-for-all.
That's right. I went to the doctor, this was last year with my mom, and my mom was like, you know, my knee hurts. My mom had hit her knee. And she was like, okay, I'm giving you, without even looking at her, okay, I'm giving you a prescription for, you have arthritis. My mom was like, you haven't even looked at my knee. How do you know that I have arthritis? And she was like, well, at your age, you have to have arthritis. And my mom is like, no, I don't have to have arthritis. I take very good care of myself. I bump my knee, and I just want you to look at it. But if that's too much, then you know what? Don't even bother. Don't even bother to write the script, though, because I'm not taking it. So that's a battle. That's a real battle. And it's not always, doctors are not always as warm and fuzzy as you may want to think they are.
And you've made the perfect point for me, Dr. Nilda, that my whole book, we're going to go right back to the first thing I said before I answered your the 3 points, which is become an EHC. The only way that we change American healthcare, that we change physician and hospital behavior, is by creating competition, by saying, this is my DNA makeup. You know it's science better than me. These are the medications you will prescribe me, or I will go to another doctor. And that's true across the board, just owning it and really owning that process. So it's a really exciting time, because nutrigenetics is the same. The technology is not as advanced, but they can print out and say, hey, here are the foods that are fuels for your body. Here are the foods that are blockers. And I'm not going to tell you that is nutrigenetics is advanced as pharmacogenetics is yet, but it's almost there. And there's nothing lost if you go ahead and start playing the nutrigenetics game based on your DNA makeup.
Now, let me ask you something. Is that something that you have to pay out of pocket? Because I know that's another issue for a lot of, the audience is paying so much out of pocket. They're already paying a lot for healthcare, and, they have these high deductibles and things like that. So is it something that we should take on our own? I mean, which I think either way we would benefit from, but do we have to pay for something like this on our own, or would our insurance pay for it? Because I know that insurances refuse to pay for a lot of things that are actually good for us. Like,
great question. It's a great question, Rachel. And so there's a complicated answer. Most insurances still don't pay for it, but through your healthcare savings account, you can pay for it. And I want to make sure I'm not directing people to 23andMe, because I'm certainly not here to advocate for one company or the other. They do DNA testing, what's also known as a partial genome sequence, and there's full genome sequencing. And I know that's real technical, but genome sequencing can range from $600 to $1,200. And I'm glad you asked that question, because you know what my book recommends? It recommends that after a year on the job, your employer pays for this for you, because it's going to bring your costs down as well as the employer's costs down. And it's going to ultimately make you healthier, which is the overall goal. So we talked about the cost, we talked about access. There are ways you can pay for it. And also, if you live in Nevada, if you live in Pennsylvania, if you live in Texas, those are 3 areas where I know they have genome sequencing pilots going. Renown Health in Reno, Geisinger Health in Pennsylvania, and down in Texas, they have a pilot project too. And I'm sure there's many more, but these are hospitals that had to champion the effort, because they have physicians as CEOs who said, enough of this. We need to get our communities healthy. They did voluntary programs where people could volunteer to get their DNA test done, and all of them, quote unquote, sold out within hours, because there's a thirst and a hunger for this. And I'll tell you, I'm going to take this opportunity to get something off my chest that I'm so tired of hearing. And it was true with boomers. And with Gen X, it might be a little true, but I can tell you with the millennials, it's not. You always hear this, oh, I don't want my employer to know about my health. That, you used to hear that a lot with boomers and Gen Xers. I'm sorry, that's just silly. In the day and age of HIPAA, your employer is not allowed to know anything about you that you don't share them. When they contract to do an DNA test, it's with a third-party provider, and they're violating the law if they know. So let's just get past ourselves and get over ourselves and understand that when our company is offering us these benefits, and they almost always start as voluntary, because that's more so because we need to wrap our brain around it, right? So let's move past that whole privacy thing, because federal law requires it remains private.
Okay. So here's my question. How do you propose that somebody who's either a solopreneur, which a lot of my audience are solopreneurs or very small business, how you propose that they handle this? Because they don't have an HR department. They are the HR department. They wear all the hats. So how do you propose they handle their health care? Because I've had people, again, we talk all the time. And the biggest problem is that the deductibles, they're paying high rates to have health insurance, and the deductibles are impossible to meet unless you're dying. And then if you're dying, you can't work. How does that, tell me, give me,
it's a great question.
Give me hope.
So at health-wealth.com, which is my website, you can find me on LinkedIn at Dr. Josh Luke, or you can go to health-wealth.com. And what we did at health-wealth.com is, even though Forbes published my book, and it's really a real resource for mid-market and Fortune 500 companies, as you already pointed out, we didn't want to leave out the solopreneur and the entrepreneur. So on the website, there's free resources. Actually, you can do a loss assessment for your company that really is just a 10-minute or less, 10 questions to tell us what you've done. And we'll tell you how much money you're, what I call wasteful healthcare spending, which you're kind of just throwing into the wind because you're not doing it better. So there's free resources there. You can also, that's where one of the places you can access the book, if not at Amazon.com. But there's also a series of partners on there that I have. I'm not a consultant, other than I come in and I help do the evaluation, and I'm kind of a matchmaker for programs that work for you.
Okay.
So I think the short answer to your question is, read the book Health Wealth, because there's enough in there for entrepreneurs to understand. One chapter talks about alternative insurance options. One thing that the Trump administration has done is they've gotten rid of the individual mandate to have health insurance that Obamacare brought forward. Okay, so now that opens up the door for you to be more creative, because you're not being forced to pick one. You get the choice to pick one. And I'm actually excited about that, because that, combined with insurers crossing state lines, is really going to create competition. And what you're going to find is products that are catered more to the solopreneur and the entrepreneur, as opposed to just cookie cutter, play by our rules, which has been in the past. So a lot of this stuff, there's several chapters in Health Wealth, Is Healthcare Bankrupting Your Business, that really appeal to the entrepreneur and the solopreneur about living healthy, about consumerism and consumer-driven healthcare, about engaging in the healthy lifestyles process. And really, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you know I'm big on millennial culture. And millennial culture meets healthcare when it comes to Health Wealth, because they're living the healthy lifestyle. In our generation, whether it's Gen Xers or Boomers, healthcare to us was, I hope I don't have to go to the hospital. And if I do, the universe starts there. And I will tell you, those are the last people that should be directing how healthcare is given.
Right. And I feel that they should also pay for alternative medicine.
Hey,
I'm one that is
number 9.
Also, okay.
Step number 9 in Health Wealth, alternative.
Okay, good. I have the book. I ordered the book. I should be getting it any day.
All right.
Yeah, because
we're on the same page.
We don't all, I don't care for traditional medicine. And I tell you, I've seen my parents who used alternative medicine, who ate well, that medicine was not just, a supplement. They really put a lot of effort and a lot of thought into what they ate, how they ate. And that's how we were raised. And I believe that, my mom came from a family that had diabetes on both sides. All of her cousins had diabetes. All of her brothers have diabetes. And my mom never got diabetes. And so the family says, well, that runs in our family. How could you not have it? And she's like, it doesn't really run in the family. It's how the family eats.
That's how you make decisions.
Very, very, very conscious of her eating habits. As a result, she's 80. She's going to be 86 years old, and no health problems, no diabetes. no high blood pressure.
You hit on 2 points that are so right on, Dr. Nilda, I'll tell you. And so when I speak, I'm a public speaker. If any of your listeners are a member of a trade organization, it doesn't matter. It's not health. Anything you do, entrepreneur, TED Talks, healthcare. I've gone to youth groups. I've gone to church groups. My presentation, look, people say, hey, you're funny and you tell great stories. But what they love is they go, you just gave us those 3 or 4 tactics that Rachel asked about that I can just go home and start saving. And I get emails and messages on LinkedIn months later saying, oh my gosh, everything worked. You made it so simple. You're the first to do that. But you mentioned 2 things that are in the book. Diabetes is one of the most preventable diseases out there. As an employer, as an entrepreneur, there are turnkey organizations. You just call them and say, hey, I got about 20 to 50 employees that are pre-diabetic or diabetic. Can you come in and do this program? How much is it going to cost us? We write you a check each month. You make it accessible to them. It's voluntary. And over a couple of years, it becomes not voluntary because those employees are expensive to you. In diabetes, I love that example because it's the easiest of those chronic diseases to control with decision-making. But I love that you brought up integrative and naturopathic medicine. That is purposely the last step of the 9 steps to financial recovery in my book, Health-Wealth, because, and you said it in your talking point a minute ago, it wraps in so many of my other steps. It wraps in telehealth and remote monitoring. It wraps in a health, wealth culture and healthy lifestyle. It wraps in alternative medicine. It wraps in artificial intelligence and using what you know from your wearables and your technology. And what you started to get to too, that I dig into a little bit in step 9 is naturopathic medicine was huge in America until the 50s. And guess who killed it? The villains of greed. Big Pharma said, hey, Gen Xers, you can only get better when you're sick if you take medicine.
Do I have a pill for you?
Exactly.
Oh, do I have a pill for you?
And I'll be honest, I can attest to that because, you know, as a matter of fact, my husband had diabetes, and I say had because he was given insulin pills. I mean, he was in bad shape. And when I tell you he incorporated a healthy lifestyle as far as his eating, and he began to work out, which, by the way, I know working out is excellent for you. He completely turned that whole diabetes. It went from on to off. And me was the thyroid issues that I had. And I tell you, working out, changing my diet, I used to get sick. I used to feel exhausted, all these different things. And I started having like natural foods, incorporating beets in my diet. And I tell you the truth, no symptoms whatsoever. I feel better than before.
All I got to do is eat beets and I'll be better. I love beets.
There you go. And at first, I'll be honest, I was like, oh, beets? I'm like, it doesn't even sound like, but I said, you know what, if it's going to make me better, I'm going to do that, you know? So let me ask you this final question. Millennial culture is relating to reducing healthcare rates, costs in America. So what is that, you know, how can they relate?
Well, I think all the steps that I outlined in this book for businesses, which is, by the way, the reason I'm not going to wait a year to release the book for individuals, because it's actually just a rewrite. It's, hey, we're going to take the same approach as an individual. And what's been neat about this process, Rachel, is I never even came up with the term EHC until I was done with the book. And I was speaking, and the folks from TED, the coaches that are coaching me how to do a TED Talk, which is 1 point, which is really hard for me. As you know, I can talk for hours. They said, look, you got to make 1 point. And the point is we got to become EHCs, engaged healthcare consumers. Well, millennials have kind of been forced to be EHCs, and they've been forced to live healthy because they can't afford healthcare. You know, like I said, with my kids, they're all 3 in high school, Gen Zers. If I were them, I would kind of say, I'll never have insurance. If I have to go to the hospital, we'll figure it out from there. Because what choice do they have? I mean, you got to give, you know, anywhere from 5 to 30%, and if you do well, up to 50% to the government for taxes. And now you're telling me I have to give another 50% for healthcare. That leaves 25% for me to live on. That doesn't sound like a way to live, you know? So millennial culture is an amazing thing. And what I can say to Gen Xers and boomers is roll your eyes for one last time before we use the M word again, because here it comes. Millennial culture became American culture in 2016. And that is a determination I made because I travel the country as a speaker, and I speak at healthcare innovation technology events. I speak at HR events. I speak at sales events. I speak at motivational events. What I saw was, as I traveled for the 3 or 4 years prior until 2016, people were saying, oh, my grandmother won't use the iPad, or my mom doesn't know how to use a phone, or dad will never do that. And in 2016, that changed. The technology became so good. So as older generations, I remember being a young Gen Xer and people saying to me, hey, you guys are crazy. You ride BMX bikes and you watch MTV and that music's going to send you in the wrong direction, all that stuff. We need to understand that we're always going to have a little bit of an objection to the younger generation, but there's so much we can learn. And the millennial culture has become American culture. And the sooner you can adapt to that, the more successful you'll be.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here's my final question. Where do you see healthcare in 5-15 year futurist? Where do you see healthcare in the next 5 to 15 years?
Personal ownership is going to change everything. In the announcement in January that Amazon, the most powerful company in the country, said enough is enough,
Right.
Started that ball rolling. A week prior to that, Apple came out and said, hey, we're developing an app so you can own your healthcare. And it's interesting because as I talk with different technology companies over the last couple of years, I've said, hey, as long as hospitals are controlling this, nothing's going to change. The consumer has to own it. And there's 5 companies out there that can help us do that. And Amazon and Apple were 2 of them. Of course, you have Microsoft, Facebook, as a couple of the others. But those are the companies that can change healthcare. And since we've started talking about those 5 companies having the power, we've seen 2 of them make a major move. So I'm really excited about that. But here's the deal for your listeners. It lies with you. You have to become an engaged healthcare consumer, just like when you're buying a car or a home. Engage in the process.
Absolutely. And what we've seen in the consumer, the consumer that buys products and services, they've become an educated consumer, but you need to become an educated consumer when it comes to your health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much. It was great having you here, Dr. Josh. We could absolutely do this again. When your next book comes out, we'll talk again and bring you back, and maybe you can bring us some more points, because you're all over the place. So there must be other things that you will be able to talk about it. And as you said, you can talk about this forever, and I can listen forever, because this is such an important thing. And I love the fact, I think the big takeaway here is we can own our health.
Yeah, it's personal to all of us, right? So I am hard to keep up with because I'm everywhere, but follow me on LinkedIn and you'll get posts every day, 3 or 4 a day at drjoshluke.com, at Dr. Josh Luke on LinkedIn, where you can see all about millennial culture, healthy culture. And if you want to know more about all these health wealth discussions we've had, it's health-wealth.com.
Right. And you have a lot of videos out there with a lot of information. Yeah. I watched many of them. So thank you so much.
There's more coming.
Okay, great. Right. And that's great. Keep the information coming. All right, guys. So it was great. This was another awesome interview. And we look forward to having you back next week with another futurist. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Foresight Strategy Show. You can hear host Dr. Nilda, co-host Rachel with featured guests every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live or anytime on demand. Visit www.drnildaperez.com/show. For more information, sign up to our Foresight Strategies Insider newsletter, a $10 value for free at www.drnildaperez.com/newsletter.